And we're live.
We are.
For the Meghann and Jessica Show. We are excited to be here with everyone today. We are going to be talking about the importance of emotions in business. Jessica and I love to have different topics that are a little bit less mainstream and a little bit more pertinent to what women are dealing with as business owners. So we just kind of get together, and this was a topic that popped for both of us, so we knew immediately who we wanted to have as our special guests. So I am ecstatic. I'm Meghann Conter, the founder of the Dames, and I'm ecstatic to have as my guest or our guest today, Connie Jones. And Connie, would you just wave to everyone here? Hello, darling. Connie is the coach for Impact Driven Changemakers, helping high-achieving professionals, private practitioners, and business owners discover their inner genius and unleash their brilliance. And having worked with Connie before, she is one of those amazing coaches and facilitators with a long background as a psychotherapist. So she is a highly qualified person to help us with our emotions. She moved into the coaching realm and years ago, and is really able to help blend those the spiritual, the mental, physical, emotional, all of it together to create this amazing orchestra of personal growth and change, helping people make radical shifts in their lives so that they can live the lives that they want. So, Jessica, why don't you introduce Violet? And welcome, Connie. We're happy to have you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
I'm
we
excited to
really
be
are.
here. Yeah, ready to dive in. It'll be fun.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Meghann. So I am Jessica Fernley. I am the seven-figure consultant. That is my brand. And I help consultant women get from 6 to 7 figures in their consulting business with ease and flow along the way. And my guest this evening is, well, I'm saying this evening, it's evening for me, but it's morning for some of you guys, right? But my wonderful guest is Violet Rainwater, who I met quite recently, actually. And Violet, I can't remember if I told you this, but I listened to you on a podcast and with the wonderful Jacqueline Malone. I was listening to it when I was in like a massive long queue in an airport. And you know that thing where you get off the plane and you're like, we're here, hooray. Oh no, look at that queue. I'm going to be in that for 2 hours. And so I listened to like the whole podcast episode, and I was just like, this is what the world needs. And so, Violet, I would love to hand over to you to say a little bit about what you do. But the thing that really jumped out at me when I first came across you and subsequently talking to you is just you are so real. Like you go there with things. You're really kind of talking about the things that actually matter, our emotions, how we feel, what we do when our emotions do not fit the kind of picture perfect, isn't life amazing? I love my life and it's all rainbows and unicorns. And I think that is so needed. So Violet, tell us a bit more about who you are, please.
Yeah, so I am a sales architect and I've been in sales my entire life. And, you know, being in sales, the sky's really the limit. So I was always looking for ways to move the needle. But what I found is that the foundation for moving the needle was sort of missed in my corporate curriculum in the traditional training. I even went to grad school and they never even touched upon it. And so the missing piece for me was really this piece on how to handle emotions. I was a financial advisor, so I worked in a cutthroat, male-dominated space. 98% was male when I started. And so, you know, it was the long hours, the long days, you're just a number, you're only as good as your last month. And it really created just a constant state of distress for me. And then you know, add in toxic bosses and bullies in the workplace and market corrections, and I would just completely fall apart. And the reason I share is because I didn't have the tools and I didn't have the awareness. And I think that by sharing stories, that's how we can really raise awareness. A lot of the stuff I share is not pretty. You know, it's the ugliest, darkest parts that I went through that I never thought I would share, but it's healing for me. And I can't tell you how many people thank me for sharing that. And like, to your point, for being real, because this is what's really going on in the workplace today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Violet. That's wonderful. Now, if you are watching along live and any questions come up as we're talking, please do drop some questions for us in the chat. We will be really happy to answer those. Meghann, where should we start with this wonderful conversation we're going to have this evening?
Well, let's say, Connie, if there's anything that you'd like to add about yourself too. I talked about you, but I want everyone to hear from your perspective too, if there's anything you'd like to talk about.
Oh, well, you did a great job. Pretty much rounded it all out. And, I guess I became a therapist in the first place over 20 years ago because of my own work, because of my own deeper work that I had to do because of my struggles. And I was the typical high performer, the high achiever, and everything worked great to a certain degree. I always say, I refer to our patterns of behavior as our survival mechanisms. So we have these, we find these behaviors and these mindsets that we develop them along the way, starting really early on at the age of from 0 to 7, we're sponges and our subconscious starts to program itself. But we're not in charge of our programming. It just becomes a subconscious programming. Well, the subconscious programming that determined my habits, my behaviors, my patterns in every way worked for me for a long time as a high achiever and a high performer. And they allowed me to succeed and to survive really well until they didn't. And that's when I ended up in a breakdown of my own, and emotional and mental and spiritual and physical. And I was mad about that because it was early on for me. I was in my early 20s, and most people don't, really start to deal with that kind of depth of hardship that early. And I realize now why I had to deal with it so early. It was part of my calling. It's part of my purpose. It's part of my work to do now with other people. And so I kind of got it out of the way. Not that you ever get that out of the way. It's always, you're always growing and developing yourself. But, began that a little early. And so now it's, I realized just how important self-awareness and self-management and emotional intelligence and all of that is in people's lives, because, and I always say, people want to go higher and they want to be more successful, but we can't go higher if we don't go deeper. And so we've got to go in, and that's what we resist, because we're afraid of taking a look at some of those things that have worked really well for us for a long time. And I'll say a whole lot more about that, but that's the heart of the work that I do, is to help people truly live in the freedom that they were created to live in, and not be in bondage to their emotions and their reactions.
Which is a perfect place to segue, because that is, I think, what happens to a lot of business owners. And we're all business owners. And so we're talking to an audience of business owners as well. And that is where this topic came up, right? Because being human means that we have emotions to deal with. And yes, you said, Connie, that we can kind of go along and do what we've always done. And either most of the time, what tends to happen is it's fine for a while, but then we start getting like the spiritual, or I call them spiritual feather tickles. And then if we don't pay attention, then we start getting the taps on the shoulder. And if we don't pay attention to that, then it starts to be more of like a, smack across the face. And then comes the 2x4, and then comes the freight train. And so all of these things, yes, we can continue on without going in and doing that deep emotional work. But for the most part, if we're going to be self-aware, evolving, changing, growing individuals, and have businesses that are healthy and thriving, at some point, or a billion points, we will have to address our emotions. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what this topic was most enlightening for me. But what about you, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't cleared this question with the three of you, but I think it's fair to say that all of us on this call have had breakdowns. I have. I had mine also in my 20s when I was 27. And I guess thinking about it, it's like, should we be doing life differently? Like, should we be sort of saying to young people, you may have a breakdown when you're an adult, and that's okay. Lots of people do.
Or breakdowns, plural.
Yeah, exactly. And actually,
yeah, I've had a couple. Yeah.
Well, yeah, when mine happened, it was so big. It was like atomic bomb level. And I crashed out of my corporate career, and I didn't get out of bed for 7 months. And I really hit rock bottom. And I think it's really interesting to look back and, obviously I've spent hundreds of hours in therapy working through why it happened and all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't one thing, it was like 10,000 things. And I'm kind of glad, I think similar to you, Connie, I'm glad that it happened in my 20s, because it taught me so many things. And yes, it was an awful thing to go through, and it was a really difficult time, but I think it has given me a level of emotional literacy with myself and with other people. A lot of the clients that I work with, they have been drawn to me because I have told people that I've had a breakdown. And it was the story that going into my business, I was convinced I would never, ever tell anyone. And it was almost like by doing the business, it's like, I won't have to explain this. And I think I got to a point quite early on in my business where I realized that actually a lot of the people coming to me had this as a shared experience. And by me not being upfront and open about the fact it had happened to me and how hard it had been and how much I didn't understand it at the time, I think I realized that I would have to go there. I would have to start sharing that story. And I have zero regrets about doing that, because the fruit of it has been so positive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's kind of that thing about destigmatizing what it means to have a breakdown. I mean, personally, I don't really understand what it means when people say, oh, I needed to take a mental health day, because for me, it was like, I needed to take a mental health 2 years. So, but if you can kind of be okay in a day, that's good. And to be honest, I think, Meghann, what you were saying about the 2x4 followed by the freight train. Oh yes. If you don't pay attention to that, then it's really significant. And I think for me, I didn't know how to pay attention to it because I didn't have a category for what was happening to me at the time. But I think as business owners, we can almost get caught in a bit of a cycle, can't we? That like the burnout cycle of pushing ourselves too far. Sorry, my cat's decided to join the conversation.
Good background music.
But we can set up our business in a way which does not lead to positive mental health. And Violet and Connie, I'd be really interested to hear your perspectives on this, because it's interesting, isn't it, that sometimes we come out of corporate thinking, well, I'm never going to put myself in those kinds of situations again. And I see this with clients. Sometimes we're very good at creating an environment which is exactly what we have decided to move away from. And it's like we're wired to almost replicate that until we do the work to break that cycle.
Yes.
And then I think what starts to happen is the more self-aware you get, you realize that cycle will repeat itself, but you become more aware and you figure out that, oh, here's that I have the needle again. I'm going to need to go through it. But
yeah.
Connie, what are your thoughts on like basically setting yourself up best in business, or using self-awareness to set yourself up best so that you don't have, I mean, honestly, I resonate with the idea of a mental health day, because I've done the work to get myself to the point where a half of a day or an hour is good enough. It's a brush up, but that's after months of breakdowns, and that's after weeks of shutouts and, all of that. So Connie, where are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that is a great question. So self-awareness is just knowing yourself. It's knowing your own emotions and how your emotions affect your thoughts and your behaviors. So, and really, let me say this first: our emotions are just messengers, and we give them a lot of power, and they do have a lot of power. And they're really important, but they're actually just alert systems. They're just alarms. They're messengers to let us know that there's a need that needs to be met. And actually, I mean, that's a whole survival mechanism within itself. And it's a really important survival mechanism that we need. Our emotional brains are always working, whether we're in tune with them or not. And so we're more effective. We are more of we're in our power. We're happier. We're more whole. I always like to think of, I like to help people function in wholeness, in the fullness and the wholeness of who they're made to be, spirit, mind, body. And when we are not aware, when we're not in tune with our emotions, our chemical messengers that are alert systems in our body that are either letting us know that there's a need that needs to be met that is not being met, or there's something that doesn't feel okay doesn't feel safe, or that doesn't, there's not something that is, something's just not okay. And when we're not paying attention to that, then we're asking for some kind of dis-ease of some sort, spirit, mind, body, to happen in our lives. And like you said, that it doesn't take long before, I always say, the whisper becomes the roar, and so it's going to roar. It'll give us the whisper first, but then, if we don't pay attention, then it will become a roar really quickly. So what I always, it is so important. And gosh, I wish somebody had taught me this years ago when I started my business. But to really take the time to get clear about who you are, how you want to show up in the world, and what your values are, what's most important to you, and to know yourself and build your business in alignment with your values and in alignment with what matters most to you and how you function and what you need, rather than doing all the things that you think you have to do and following the strategies and the formulas and doing it exactly like someone told you to do, or like you think you have to do because someone else does it that way, rather than really giving yourself permission to listen and go inside and learn to trust that intuition, learn to trust your heart about what do I need and how do I want to do this and what works best for me. Because when we're doing that, then we're not going to, we're living in alignment, we're living congruently, and we're not going to burn out. We're going to be in health and wholeness and harmony. And that's the most beautiful way to live.
Absolutely.
I know Violet has a lot to say. I'm sure a lot to say about that. So I want to hear what you have to say.
I was one of those that didn't hear the whisper. I had a few breakdowns, but my big one was in my 40s. And I will just say, to your point, I didn't have a level of awareness. Even though I was always into studying personal development, it was so close to me that I couldn't see it. And that's why I speak on this, because I think it's key to not just have an awareness to your patterns and your behaviors, but why. Where did that come from? And for myself, my programming, I'm an immigrant, not only am I a latchkey kid from the 80s, but I was also an immigrant kid. So there was so much neglect and trauma and poverty, so there was trauma on top of trauma. And so during that time, when we just immigrated, those first 10 years from like 4 to 10, that's when your brain programming is solid. Like that's when your brain is getting programmed. So I was programmed to fear, because that's what my parents, they were terrified, they were paralyzed with culture shock, right? So I had no awareness that my brain programming was the root cause of my suffering. So it's not just, emotional intelligence, it's understanding what causes you, like why you get triggered and what that is, and being able to step back and identify the trigger, because then you can take your power back. Because for me, what would happen is I would get triggered. I was on 100% commission. So, if being a top sales producer, I had a lot of great days, but there were also times where I would get what's called a chargeback, which is essentially when a client changes their mind. That happens all the time as an entrepreneur, right? Like you move forward and then you move back. And so for me, because I grew up in poverty and I had this unhealthy relationship with money, even though I made a lot of money, it would cause me to go down this downward spiral. Like I would just spiral out of control. It was like a tidal wave was coming down on me, and it never made sense logically, because it's not in the intellect. It's in the programming. It's in the chemistry of your body. And so one of my favorite quotes is from a book called The Ultimate Secrets of Total Self-Confidence. It's by Dr. Robert Anthony. So not Tony Robbins, but Dr. Robert Anthony. And in that book, he says that you can never outperform your current level of awareness. And so I think where we always must begin is by lifting the hood, if you will, and taking a look deeper as to why you have the patterns, why you have the coping mechanisms, what's that all about. And so that's what I would like to add is I was one of those who did not see it coming. I did not have an awareness. And until I did, I could not really scale my business. I could not change my results until I identified and dealt with the core issue.
Right.
I think that's what happens a lot of times, is that there's this undercurrent of fear that also is developed in those early developmental stages, so that when we get to that point and it's like we're bumping up against a ceiling or a wall or something, we don't know what that is. So the fear paralyzes us. And
Yes.
some people say, okay, I'm going to walk through this and I'm going to figure out what it is. And others hit that and just bounce off of it. And until they don't, right? And it's all perfect and it's all divine and everything is orchestrated the way that it is on purpose. And those of us who recognize and say, okay, it's time to go beneath the surface again, to do the shadow work, to do the growth work, to do whatever it is that you call it yourself. We are the ones who are choosing to be leaders. And as I say in the Dames, you can only grow as much professionally as you're willing to grow personally. And I see that, and I'm sure we all do. We see that very clearly with leaders who are willing to do that growth work and those who aren't. It can be pretty clear. So we are, I think, all advocating for do the work. It sucks at times, and trust us, it is not rainbows and unicorns all the time, but it is so beautiful on the other side of self-awareness and continued self-awareness and continued self-growth. So beautiful.
Yeah, that
Definitely.
those emotions, we don't need to partner with them, but we need to honor them because they're giving us some really good information about a really core programmed belief there that is driving everything in us. And usually those core beliefs are based in fear, doubt, and shame. Self-doubt and shame. So it's one of the three or all of the three. And so if we can get to, that's why, it's really important to do that deep work, because what you're reacting to is what your subconscious mind has programmed without understanding why it programmed what it did. So, your experiences early on that caused you to feel a certain way, you developed really powerful core beliefs that are driving you right now. And so most of the time we never upgrade our programming. We don't even understand our programming. We don't know we're programmed, and we just that program keeps taking us to the same place. And then we wonder, why can we not break through that ceiling?
Yeah.
I'd love to look at that and say, okay, so in a tangible, tactical way, how have we been able to see those emotions and then have that be a catalyst for going inside and doing the work? Like, what are some of those triggers, those things, those points that we may not have had the awareness when we were in our 20s or whatever, but at some point all of us developed the awareness that X happens, emotion, then what is next? So I'd love to go there. Maybe Violet.
Well, could I ask a question? Sort of, I think it's going in the same direction, but it's picking up on something that Violet said very briefly about this intergenerational trauma. And I think that is such an interesting concept once you learn to listen for it. And I have had experiences where I have been freaking out inside, and I've suddenly just gone, that doesn't belong to me. That is something that one of my parents or my grandparents experienced, and either I've seen it or I've picked it up through my DNA, or there's been some kind of thing. And just getting that awareness, I think, sometimes, and being like, oh, that's not something that's relevant to me. It's not something that's happened to me. It's not something I need to hold on to or carry for this previous generation. I think that can be a really exciting breakthrough to start to get. It's not that you then don't need to do the work, but it's realizing that actually a lot of these things, they are imprinted on us, whether it's in our DNA or through, nature, nurture, all that kind of stuff. But I think that is a really significant thing that we don't often get the insight on unless we are helped to start to listen for those voices. Would you agree, ladies?
Oh yeah. Yes. Absolutely. I mean, for myself, my father is a child Holocaust survivor. So a lot of my trauma came from him not processing his trauma, and every generation before lived in poverty, and, Russian Jews. I mean, there was persecution generation after generation after generation. And as I learn more about my family, I realize how strong that lack mindset, that fear, that the bottom always falls out, is programmed into me. And if anything, it just gives me more power when I'm able to identify it. So Meghann, to your point, you were asking, what is something we can do? Where do we start? When I work with my clients, I always start by identifying some of these triggers in the workplace that you have. A lot of people are triggered by the sales process. Like I always talk to business owners that hate talking about sales because it brings up stuff about money. But identifying what it is that triggers us. And if you're like, well, what is that? That's anything that takes away your peace. And the way you can tell is if your energy drops, so maybe a trigger for you is a boss, right? And so you have to go into your monthly meeting, but you notice that when you're in there, you're really triggered. And after that, your energy just drops. Because just by being angry or frustrated, even for a little bit, it drains our energy. And so these are all things that we can start getting just a deeper awareness to, is asking, oh, what is that? What is that? Why did I just go from feeling good to feeling bad? And what was it that she said? What was it that I heard that made me feel this way? And when does my energy dip during the day? Because maybe you're just triggered, in the morning. Maybe you're not a morning person. Maybe there's something about the morning. But identifying what triggers you, what brings you down in your energy, in your frequency, because when that happens, that is great insight. As Connie said, this is like a great indication of what needs to be looked at.
Yes, definitely. Connie, what about your thoughts? Love it.
Yeah, and so I always say I call it either a drop or it's fear or anxiety are always there. There's a doubt, there's a fear, there's anxiety, or there's a feeling of not enough. So there's a feeling of just that I want to play small, I want to get small, I want to hide, so one of those will be the triggers. And it may be a little of all of that. But we have to stop and recognize those. And those are the messengers. Those are the messengers. We don't need to push that away and shame ourselves over that or try to avoid that. We need to lean into those when we have those, because there's really powerful information in there for us to pay attention to. And what's underneath that is, if we can learn how, and this is the process of learning how to understand, what am I believing there? First of all, it's what am I feeling? That when you feel that dip, that drop, that I just felt a sickness in my stomach. All of a sudden I have this anxiety. All of a sudden I can't get comfortable. I don't have any peace. I'm feeling sad, whatever it is, any change in emotion, any change in our state of being. What am I feeling? And then what belief is producing that state? What belief is producing that feeling? And then, because every single time, but for instance, I can give you what I hear a lot is, my clients are all getting towards the end of their, I'm feeling anxiety because I don't know where my clients are getting towards the end of their packages, and I don't know where the next, who's going to come next. And that scares me to death. And there's that. So, there's probably, if we get underneath that far enough, there's probably some belief, there's definitely scarcity, lack beliefs there, but there's probably that belief still that my effort, self-sacrifice, I have to work hard, I have to produce in order to provide for myself, and I'm never going to have enough, is probably, and so that's what's driving that anxiety and that fear. And so then what we have to do is we have to recognize that anytime we're connected with a belief that is fear-based or doubt-based or shame-based, that we're disconnected from love, that we're disconnected from the loving universal support that is limitless, that we have access to at every time, in every moment. But we didn't learn that as kids. We didn't learn that from 4 to 10 or 0 to 7 or whenever. We learned that it was a scary world and we're not going to have what we need, or we can't say how we feel, or we can't ask for what we want, or we're not enough in some way, or what we do is always wrong. And so we've got to get at what is causing us to continue to feel that way. Another one is, I just have this, I have to do everything in my business and I'm exhausting myself and I'm working all the time because I'm afraid if I don't, then my business will fail. And there's, so that, we could go on and on and on about what are the core beliefs underneath that. It's like, there's more of that. I have to make it happen. It's on me. There's fear that I'm not really enough. If I can't do enough or have enough to be enough,
Right.
and so we could go on and on and on about what everybody's core belief is different, but it all comes down to being based in shame or fear, or lack of some sort. And it's habituated in us over and over and over to the point that it feels so real. And,
Yep.
we live in this 3D reality that we can see only the things around us that we can see. But really, the 4D is where there's a whole other 4D reality of an abundant, limitless universe that's available to us that we don't know how to access. And so we live in limitation and lack and fear and survival. And
not realizing that we could actually look at those beliefs and say, okay, which one of these no longer serves me, and how can I replace them with something else?
How is that working for me? And then that's the hardest part, though, that people are, I always say, what empowering love connected thought can I use to shift into that would change everything right now? If I could believe love, if I could believe in unlimited, whole, perfect, unfailing love, that I'm supported by that, what could I shift my belief into? And people always say, well, that doesn't feel true. Well, it doesn't have to feel true yet. That's where learning that process of transforming your beliefs. And that's a hard process, but it is completely life transforming, because we don't realize we are creating our reality based upon our beliefs, and we're holding frequencies in our mind, and the frequencies that we hold in our mind are
creating our reality
by the belief, and that becomes our reality. It's this vicious cycle. And so we've got to undo that, but nobody teaches us how to do that.
Except for you guys and all of us that are on this call. So thank God.
Yeah, right.
Jessica, where I saw you writing some notes. Where do you want to go next?
Oh, I've had so many thoughts, but I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I love what you're saying there, Connie. And I think when you think about it, a lot of the time our businesses are geared around this like scarcity scenario. Like, we take on clients, they have a fixed term with us, then it ends, and then we have got to find more. And I think that can set up like a real set of problems for us that we have to, I think quite quickly, we have to get our heads around. We have to be okay, because otherwise every time a client finishes with you, it's like, the world has just ended and I'm going to go bankrupt and oh my gosh. But I think linked to that is that what I have experienced myself and seen with a lot of my clients is that it's not factually based. Even though we believe that it is, we can then change our financial situation. We can grow our business. In my own business in the last 2 years, I have made more money than I've ever had before in my life. The scarcity is still sometimes there. And I still like to play these little games with myself, like, oh no, I'm running out of money. And then you look at it and you're like, no, you're not. Like, you're fine. But the comfort of scarcity is fascinating, isn't it? The fact that we can hold on to it far beyond the point where we need it. And I think that, so that was one of the things that I was writing down, but also thinking about money itself. As entrepreneurs, we blow everything up, don't we? We break all of the rules about like how much money we're supposed to have or allowed to have. It's not surprising that we get so many big emotions and that we go through seasons in our businesses where we're just like, I'm really struggling at the moment. And there's no obvious reason why, because we are changing the paradigm of everything we have been told to believe about the world. And it's that process, isn't it, of believing that the world is like this and living according to all these little rules and keeping very safe inside this box. And then you kind of realize, no, that it's actually more like this. And then eventually realize that there is nothing. It's all kind of constructed by us. And life can be as big, abundance can be as big as we want it to be. And then you look back and you're like, why was I living like this when there's nothing? So yeah, those are my thoughts. I imagine that kind of we're on a similar wavelength.
Well, let's talk tactically about that, because when you have that realization and that awareness, or when you start to have that, it requires us to step into it more and to expand into it. Because if we just get that little sliver, it's hard to trust that sliver that is actually happening. So I'm curious, Violet, when you notice that little sliver opening itself up, or you maybe don't even notice it, but you're wanting to be open to it. You're wanting to be open to that option of the abundance. What's a way that people can do that?
Yeah, and I love this question because this is something that I never connected the dots with. But I always say that the best thing you can do right now is regulate your nervous system. Because what happens is we go into fight or flight mode, our nervous system gets dysregulated. Here come the racing thoughts, the sweaty palms, the sick feeling. It's really a chemistry change, like a chemical change in our body. And so it's just like Einstein explained, you cannot solve a problem on the same thought level that created it. So there's no solution in the problem. Like, so you have to literally, the only thing you have to do, you don't have to make the call, you don't have to close the business, you have to step back and learn how to regulate your nervous system, right? And so that's why I'm big on breath work. I'm big on meditation. I set my nervous system every morning by my morning practice. I don't go a work day without at least 20, 30 minutes of meditation because I was programmed to run on anxiety. Right. Yeah. So I'm always working with my nervous system and hacking into it, because then I open myself up to the universal mind. Because when I can calm my nervous system, right, now I have access to wisdom, intuition, guidance, creativity, even opportunities in front of my nose that I cannot see when my fight and flight has been activated. Precisely. So I like to teach it on a more chemical, like science-based, like let's just break it down to the science, because we can talk about it and we can look at it, but what can we do right now to help ourselves feel better? We need to learn how to regulate our nervous system.
Totally. And that is exactly what neuroprogramming and neuroplasticity and all of the studies of, even going back to the conversation around epigenetics and ancestral wounding and problems, that's all like, it all enters into our mind. And it's like these well ingrained, I call them single tracks, just like a mountain biking single track that have been ingrained in our brains until we have that level of awareness and then say, oh, I actually need to turn left here and start creating a new neural pathway. Yeah. And that is like
because the old story doesn't work. The old story is a lie.
And when we realize that, right?
Well, and it's hard to see it. And I'll share a story that
at first it's hard to see it. Then it becomes blatantly obvious. And you're like, oh, there, I missed the fork in the road. Oops.
There it is. Yeah. I mean, we literally lie to ourselves. And I remember in high school, I used to walk by the popular kids and I would literally physically shake because I was convinced they were talking about me. Meanwhile, they didn't know who the heck I was. Like, kids in high school, they're all up in their own business. Like they didn't even notice me. But in my mind, the story was so real. And I can name a million more stories in the workplace that happened. And so we continue to lie to ourselves when we don't regulate our nervous system and tap into the power of neuroplasticity and create those new pathways, which is, by the way, Meghann, how I was able to finally heal myself after years of running on debilitating anxiety was through neuroplasticity and creating new pathways in the brain.
Totally. And it's, there's so many different fields and ways and directions that we can all choose and go. And I think there's Connie, yay. It's a matter of trusting in our own paths and being open to those paths that we have to be really looking for them. It's like, if we want to ignore it, it won't show itself. And I would guess that, Connie, in the conversation we were just having, I would guess that what was the question that you answered, Violet?
What can we do? Like to step back, like what can we do once we have this awareness? What do we do next? And so I was just sharing, it's time to regulate the nervous system. It's not a doing journey, it's a being journey. We have to change our state of being.
And so, Connie, I would venture to guess that part of what you would suggest would be similar. She was sharing mindfulness, meditation, breath work, but then also, depending on where you are, just so that we hit all sides of the spectrum, For some people, it's prayer, right? For some people, it's connecting to the divine. It's really tapping into that, like you were saying, that infinite source of love and really becoming aware. So let's, instead of answering the same question, let's maybe say, Connie, what would be a habit that you would encourage people to put into place to become continuously aware of those flags that start showing themselves, so that we can grow instead of getting smacked by the 2x4s all the time?
Yeah, such a great question. I would say the first thing is really simple, is just slow down. We need to stop reacting and start responding. And so slow down enough to pay attention to when you feel those lows, when you feel your energy drop, when you feel your frequency decrease, when you feel the the emotional shift. And when you do, that's where, and I'm sure Violet already said this, that's where really connecting. I like to teach people how to come down out of their head and drop down into their heart, into their feeling space, into the body. And the body tells us a lot, and the emotions are just ways of making sense of what our body's already feeling. And so our body just has something it needs us to know. And so paying attention to, okay, what is that feeling? And sometimes I'll even put my hand on my belly or my heart, and, and I'll just kind of connect, and I sit there, and then if you don't know, journal until you find out, process until something comes up for you. What am I thinking? What am I afraid of? What am I feeling? What do I not want to feel if I could feel it? What do I not want to know right now? Because sometimes that's the case. And then the mindfulness, doing that, retraining, reprogramming the autonomic nervous system to not be in fight or flight, to not be in survival mode. And then once you've done that, then of course, if you've got a spiritual practice, get in touch with with however you connect spirit wise. And that's always, to feel that sense of love and support. And that's where I do a lot of mindfulness and visualization around, okay, what is the truth right now, and how can I feel the support? I can feel literally I can, check in with my senses. I can feel my hands touching my skin. I can feel the support of the floor underneath my feet. I can, and I can do some breathing and let myself come out of the fight or flight and back into my body.
Jessica, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that's been said. I think, like, for me, when I have been in, like, it tends to come in seasons with me. And like, we had a lot of trauma, like, in our family last year. And I felt a lot of anxiety in the early part of this year for several months, really. And I was doing a lot of breathing practices. I was going on walks and doing the kind of the sensory, what's 5 things I can see? What's 4 things I can hear? And you're kind of thinking, this is never going to work. Oh, actually, I feel a bit better. Oh. But like, I think journaling is really, that's such a problem solving activity. I think the big overarching thing I would want to say is that it matters how we feel. I think I am not alone in sort of being given the message all through my early life. Feelings aren't important. Feelings are self-indulgent. Just ignore them. Just plow through. Keep calm. Carry on. That's what we say in the UK. And actually, it matters. If you're showing up to work, if you're sitting down at your desk and you've got that energy drop that Violet mentioned, and Connie as well, it matters if you feel like that. And actually, don't do what we have all done at various points and like wait for the freight train to really shake things up. Like, take the action. Like, the energy drop is significant. Listen out for that whisper. Life is so much easier when we pay attention.
And I think it's also about choosing to realize where we are systemically numbing and where we are personally numbing.
Yes.
There is a lot of ease in hiding from our feelings. It's much easier to drink a glass of wine when you start feeling nervous or depressed. It is just, it becomes those autonomic nerves that we're talking about, and it becomes a habit, and it's a coping mechanism that when you really come down to it, it, for some reason, and I'm sure Connie or Violet know the reason, but we are afraid of our feelings and we avoid them at all costs when it's like 90 seconds and the dang thing can be gone. But we would rather avoid it and go with some kind of coping mechanism, feed our faces or drink a glass of wine or, you know, smoke weed or whatever the thing is. Go work, sit behind your desk and tap away and, you know, nervously get through whatever it is. But I think that we are all evolved women in business, and we're growing companies that are making huge differences in our worlds. And speaking to women, because that's the audience that I'm typically used to speaking to, we often have been taught, and I think it's a lot of society, and I think there's a lot of things we could go around here, but we've taught to, part of our mechanisms, our coping mechanisms, is to disconnect from our bodies, to just get out of our bodies, to get out of our hearts, to stay in our heads, because that's where we can logisticize and we can, you know, rationalize. But most of the stuff that works, in my experience, has nothing to do with what's up here. It has everything to do with what's here in our second and third dantians, our lower and our middle dantians, in the spaces where we are designed to feel the feelings, to process our messages that are coming from our intuition. And it takes a lot of practice and trust in ourselves to get there. But those of us who know that we're here to evolve humankind, we're doing these things, and we know you can do it. So if you're feeling those inklings, trust in that and work with someone like Violet or someone like Connie to take those big plunges and those big dives. It can be really scary when you do this by yourself, and it's very difficult to see the blind spots. And there's many, many blind spots, a shit ton of them. So,
and there's just things that we don't know because we've never understood them before. Like the day that I realized that ruminating is actually not helpful. I'd always told myself it was a really good thing to do because it was me supporting myself and being very self-sufficient. And you're like, oh no, it's the opposite. That's a shame.
Same thing with venting. What I experienced, like venting, was not healthy for me as a person who goes to a coping mechanism of anger. Venting is one of the worst things I can possibly do. So, but it's these things that we become aware of, and that's what's most important. And then when your awareness is there, you see the belief that's attached, you recognize the feeling you'd rather have, and you change the belief that changes the behavior.
Yeah.
So,
and our survival patterns work really well for us to a certain degree. They're very productive. And so I was just going to add to that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was going to say that at some point, that, or try to remember to say that, because our emotions we're either letting them out in voluntarily, or they're going to come out sideways. They're going to come out one way or another at some point. We're going to act out sideways in some way. And that's how all kinds of self-sabotaging, destructive behaviors happen. And, or we're going to try to keep them down. They're still going to come out, but we're going to try to mute them, or, keep the volume of them down, or numb ourselves so that we don't feel them. But it doesn't mean we're not feeling them. We are feeling them. Our body that's where though usually they come out physiologically, or we make a sabotaging decision of some sort. We make an error that we, and then we wonder, oh my gosh, how did I get here? Well, our subconscious creates the self-sabotage. It's coming out one way or another. And so the good thing about, if you're feeling these things, is that it's not something wrong with you. It's something right with you.
Yeah.
It's actually your body telling you something. And it's just a matter of it's not a bad thing to go ask for help. Doesn't mean you're broken. Doesn't mean you're wrong or malfunctioning. It means
you're human.
It means you're functioning, and there's an alarm there that you just don't know what to do. And there are specialists who know how to help you reprogram that, just like a doctor, just like a personal trainer, just like a financial advisor. We're the same. But why is that stigma attached? It's because it just really doesn't make sense, because it really is our most fundamental survival mechanism that we're turning off, and we don't want to pay attention to it or learn how to what to do with it, how to listen to it, and moderate it when it's working.
Yeah.
It's working, but it's not working. You know.
Yeah.
Violet,
And
what
I
were your
think with
thoughts
that,
there?
oh, sorry, I was just going to jump in and say,
Violet. Let's let
Oh, go
Violet.
ahead.
I just
Yeah, I'd
want,
like
I just
to-
wanted to piggyback really quick and just say, you know, the key point is as we do this work, the other side of it is so worth it. Like you're talking to someone who used to, my journey was one of constant anxiety and trying to prove myself and perfectionism and people pleasing. I mean, all of those coping mechanisms. And I just don't run that way anymore, you know? And so I like to call it, it's you, but it's self-actualized. It's the other side. It's the other side of the hero's journey, right?
Yes.
And it's so worth it. Like nothing I've done in my life has been worth this inner journey. So for anyone watching, I just want you to know those changing those neural pathways, it takes repetition, but trust that you will have exponential results if you just stick with it and create these new practices to manage your emotional state of being.
So true.
Yes. 17,000 thumbs up. Well, Violet, where can people learn more about you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so they can go on my website, www.violetrainwater.com. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. It's my most favorite platform, so they can find me in LinkedIn under Violet Rainwater as well.
Awesome. And what about you, Connie?
So yeah, I actually put it on the screen. It's conniejonescoach.com is my website. And then Facebook, Instagram, well, let's see, Facebook and LinkedIn as Connie Jones, and then Instagram as @ConnieJonesCoach.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you, ladies, both. This was a wonderful topic. And Jessica, why don't you speak and then I'll close out.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, so please do come and connect with us all on LinkedIn. If you would like to talk about any of these issues more, I think that'll be a really fun thing to do. If you are a woman consultant looking to start your business, or even you're still in your corporate career and you are wondering like how to start a consulting business, I am running a free challenge this very week, and it's not too late to join in and come and do that. So come and find me on LinkedIn. The information on how to register is called Your High Ticket Head Start, because that's what I like to give people. It's on the banner of my LinkedIn profile. So come and connect with me. Sign up for that. You can take part. It's running this week, Tuesday till Friday. It's going to be amazing. So please do come and be a part of that. Meghann, what do you have for us?
Ooh, that sounds awesome. And what is the challenge? Like, what are they doing?
We're going to be creating the blueprint for a consulting business that delivers $10,000 per month minimum. 100K really, for my audience, is a starting point. I help women get from 6 to 7 figures typically, but I like to do this as something to really help those women who are my clients, but they're not quite there yet in terms of where the revenue is. And so it's a really fun thing. I know an awful lot about this stuff. I like to give away a lot of value in these events that I do. So come and be a part of that.
Yes. And you do. You give a lot of value no matter what you do. So please do join Jessica in her challenge. That sounds like a lot of fun and super valuable. I just love having these conversations. Jessica and I have an incredible network, and that is what I am most proud of in business is the community that I have built over the last, really since, 2009 when I started my first business. And I really do feel like it is the people that we are connected to that are raising the consciousness of this planet. And it's these kinds of conversations that we're having that are really creating this new world that we all get to live in, despite the stuff that goes on in the world around us. When we have these conversations and we work on our own inner game, we're really able to elevate everyone around us, and it creates a beautiful ripple effect. So in the Dames, if you are a woman who runs a 6 or 7 figure business, or you're a woman in a director or higher position in a large organization, we would love to have you come check out one of our Dames virtual roundtables. These are free experiential events twice a month. You can find out more at thedames.co/roundtable. And that is a great place to come learn about us. And we are all impact-driven women who are on our way to 7 figures or beyond, and women who are in those director roles going toward the C-suite. And we are all high caliber, high impact women who are on big missions to change the world. So would love to see you on one of those roundtables. And Jessica, when are we back for our next Jessica and Meghann show, so that we can...
Do you know what? It's quite soon. I actually honestly can't remember. I'm scrolling my phone this very minute.
Oh, I got it. No,
have you got it?
I don't. Hold on. Yes, I do. September 22nd, and that's at the same time. So 12 noon Mountain, 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. British Standard Time. And that is going to be on money mindset. So we are super stoked about that topic for sure.
And the other thing is we are creating a calendar for people who enjoy these shows. Like we always want to have really like interesting, relevant conversations about the stuff you really need to be thinking about as a business owner. So if you're just like, yeah, I love these, tell me when they all are, you can actually subscribe to our calendar. We will post the link to that below this video in the next 24 hours. And if you hit subscribe, we're not going to send you emails or anything like that. It just creates a nice little calendar invite with all the details of all our upcoming sessions. It just goes straight in whichever calendar you use. It's very clever like that. So look out for that if you would like to subscribe to future ones and hear more about the conversations that we're having and meet incredible guests like we've had today.
Yes. So I say we close out with one short, succinct thought, each person. Whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first.
Yes.
I'll go with one of my favorite quotes. I think it's a great way to end. We do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. The Talmud.
Love it.
Beautiful.
So good. I'm going to come back to if you want to go higher, you got to go deeper.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful. And I'll say, don't sweat the small stuff. And it's all small stuff. And when it seems like the wall in front of you is like a tower that goes on for miles, shift your perspective, because chances are it's as thin as a sheet of fabric. And that perspective shift can change everything for you.
Yeah. And I think I want to say, it's worth it. It's worth doing the work, uncovering this next version of yourself who is not held back in all the ways that you currently are. That is the result of doing this work. I think we can fear getting into it in case it takes this lid off this Pandora's box that we then can't put back on. And oh my gosh, there's so much mess in there. But like, do the work, commit to the work, commit to the journey, allow yourself to become your next level self. That's what I would say, because it is such a magical process. It will take you places you have never even imagined. And you are that person. It's all in there. So let's do the work. Let's let that version of you out into the world.
Absolutely. On that note, thank you all for coming. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.